All right, so good morning again. I wanted to introduce our next panel here, Friend or Foe, How Social Media Affected Elections in Asia. So we have a great panel actually going across the region. So first off, we have Ayako Mie over at the Japan Times. We also have Jeremiah Fu over at Shantou University. And we have Youkyung Lee at the Associated Press. And of course, Kevin Seitz, lecturer right here at HKU. So I'm just going to turn it on over and let you take it away.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. How's the conference so far for you? You learning anything? Good. If this were an Irish-American journalist conference, we'd be meeting in a pub this morning. But instead, we're here, and we'll actually probably learn something by the time it's over. You're here to hear, obviously, the panel that was advertised. And how we're going to do this is, fairly breezy. We're going to give the panelists a chance to talk for about 3 to 5 minutes about their area of coverage. And we obviously have the powerhouse nations in Asia represented here, Korea, Japan, and China. And so we're going to talk about the impact of social media, SMS, on the elections in those regions, as well as Malaysia, an area that Jerry has been focusing on. But I'd like to broaden it out as well, if that's good with you. We're going to let them talk for a little bit, ask some questions amongst the panelists. And then about 20 minutes or 30 minutes into the panel, we're going to open this up to you and let you ask some of the questions that you're interested in learning about. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We don't want this to be like one of my classes here at HKU where I talk and everyone looks at me like I'm from Mars. That happens quite a bit. So a little bit of interaction would help. And any questions that you have, we'll definitely get to them. Just hold off as we get through this initial panel discussion. Youkyung?
Yes, so is this on? Okay. I'll just talk to you a little bit, introduce you to how it was happening in South Korea. So at the end of 2011, Constitutional Court made this ruling that allowed people to use Twitter and social media to express their opinion on certain candidates or elections. So it was actually 2012 when social media became real campaign tools that public and the candidates could use. And there were two really important elections in South Korea, one general elections and presidential election in 2012. And that's when we really first saw the impact of SNS on elections. But it's been only 1 year, so I don't think we have enough studies or data to draw a conclusion about what's been the real impact of SNS on elections. However, a lot of people argue that it did help bringing up voters' turnout, and the voters' turnout was really high in 2012 presidential election, which was 76%. So a lot of people say the SNS did help bringing up the voters' turnout, but in South Korea, although a lot of people are smartphone users and many people are very active on online forums or SNS, a lot of these area also is dominated by more people who support the liberal opposition party candidates. So when they thought the election is going to be the opposition candidate was going to win the presidential election, but when the election result came out, it was actually the conservative ruling party candidate who won the election. So these people who were really active on the social networking services and thought the opposition candidate was going to win felt very disappointed when they saw the actual election result, which the Conservative Party member won by a margin that was wider than expected, even though the voters' turnout was really high, which people thought was going to be favorable for the opposition party candidate. So South Korea has about 1 year of history in SNS and elections, and there were some impact, but I would say it might be too early to draw from a conclusion whether there's a causation between SNS and elections. So that will be, I think, just to introduce what's going on in South Korea. Yeah.
Malaysia is a bit different. We have no such thing as press freedom. Our newspaper can be closed down in 24 hours if the government doesn't like you. They don't have to like your face, and then they can close you down the next day, basically. So since '99, that I'll be talking about 3 general elections actually: 99, 2004, and 2004, 2008, and the recent one, 3 weeks ago in Malaysia. So we started using. No, what am I saying? Why am I using the word we? I mean, the Malaysians are using SMS as the tool to mobilize people to go to places to listen to political rallies and all that. That was back in 2004, and then we were asked to help develop technologies to do mass SMS. That was some time ago. Then in 2008, there was a huge turnout of voters, and the incumbent ruling party won again, but they lost 2 states. Okay, there are 13 states in Malaysia. Most of the states are governed by the ruling party, but they lost 5 states and they lost 2 more states to the opposition. And they claim that the loss was due to social media. People were blogging about it. People were mobilized because the war was lost on the blog platform. So between 2004 and 2008, both sides, the opposition and the incumbents, spent a lot of resources in building up more blogs, more free newspaper online, and things like that. And then came Facebook. So when Facebook came, people were building Facebook-like pages and all that to heighten issues that the government doesn't like. Things like the submarine issue, if you know about it. The Malaysian government bought a submarine that doesn't submerge. And then, yes, plenty of money. And then, of course, the murder of this Mongolian woman who later became subject matter of one TVB series. And then, and of course, the diamond ring that our Prime Minister's wife bought and all that. So things like that, they are all exposed. And then, of course, government aides who were thrown out of the ICAC equivalent of Malaysia office and died. So things like that. So stories like that were being exposed because in the past there's no such thing as an avenue for stories like that to be exposed. So come 2013, very high turnout of voters, same as Korea. We had 80-something% turnout. So all of us were thinking, oh, maybe this time the wind of change has blown. 51% voted for the opposition, 47% voted for the ruling party, but the ruling party won. Very strange. Okay, anyway, we have a very strange system where in certain parts of Malaysia, you can win by 56,000 majority, and you only win 1 seat. In other areas, you win by 200 majorities, and you can win 3 seats. Things like that. It's very strange. Anyway, so that's Malaysia, and social media has been used to do a lot of this work. And before the 2013 general election, Google actually contacted us because we were involved in a YouTube channel called Media Rakyat, where we go out and do political rally talks of political opposition political leaders. And so they put us on the front page of the Google General Election page, and we were getting something like 500,000 hits per day during the campaign period. So we made quite a fair bit of money from Google Ads. So that's about it. And on the China side, because I teach at Shantou, so we have some students, and we believe if we don't bring the students out to Malaysia, they'll probably never ever get to see a chance to see a general election in their entire life. So we just decided to bring some of them to Malaysia. So 2 of them are here actually. Can you raise your hand? Yeah. So 2 of them are here. They went to Malaysia. So they were involved in observing how the election works and all that. So that's basically our involvement and my observations in the last few years.
Ayako?
So on Japan, I have a question. So what do you think the average age of the people who actually cast ballots in Japan?
52.
Oh my gosh, you guys are really good. 53. That's really, well, it's really reflective of the growing population in Japan, right? So finally, the Japanese government decided that they're gonna let the lawmakers or the candidates to use internet once election kicks off. So before, like, I mean, we have upcoming election in July, upper house election, but before that, the lawmakers could not update their Facebook posting or comments or tweet or anything like that to solicit votes. So, in order to attract more young voters, they decided to finally deregulate the election campaign. But I'm not really sure if that will really push up some of the voter turnout in Japan, as you saw in South Korea. Because in Japanese election system, it's pretty much it's more about face-to-face, saying hello, handshaking, that gets you a lot of votes, especially like when you look at the data in 2013, the last election, December, 84% of the votes were coming from 60s. I'm sorry, the people in the 60s, 84% voted. And in the people in the 20s, 49% voted. So we're not really sure if the internet can really help to sort of get the young people like involved in politics or interested in politics, because there is like a fundamental problems in plaguing in Japanese politics. I don't really have to go over this now because I'm sure you guys probably have a lot of questions on this. But so we are yet to see. At the same time, we have a very strict rule. So if even though the internet is going to be deregulated in the upper house election in July, only the political party and the candidates can send out emails to the voters soliciting some supports, but not the third party, meaning I cannot send Eric, hey, you know what, can you vote for ABC candidate? If I do that, I have to pay probably $5,000 in fine and probably face the possibility of like being stripped of the right to vote for or run for public office for a year. So people are kind of wondering like what if I violate the law and stuff like that. So I'm not really sure if this, unless the government do a great job in explaining what the rules are. I think we are not going to see a lot of like effect from the deregulation of the internet. But it's still fascinating because as you know, I mean, it's the internet penetration in Japan is more than 80%, and the young people are using more Facebook, Twitter, and stuff like that. So I'm sure they'll help, but I don't know the extent. As Youkyung just said, we kind of have to gauge the effect after the election.
Actually, just to relate it to that, there are other many factors that drive up voters' turnout. So we can single out SNS as the biggest impact driving up the voters' turnout. For example, there was high anticipation that South Korea's presidential election is going to be really tight race. So that also prompted a lot of older generation to go to the poll. So when you look at the election results, people in the 50s and 60s were like the largest voters group among the different ages. So that also helped the conservative party win the election. Yeah.
Ayako brings up a very interesting point. When you look at Japan and 80% internet penetration there, one of the most wired nations on earth, the fact that this isn't able to be utilized in the elections in a very effective way is incredibly surprising. Is there a reform movement to liberalize the access during the elections and to make it a more important factor? Or is the fact that your average voting age is 53, as you said, going to keep the internet on the outskirts or the perimeter of the elections?
Oh, no, that's exactly what I was talking about. So we passed the legislation to allow the candidates and political parties to use the internet, but still we have some regulations. So we're probably gonna let the average voters to utilize emails and something like, or banner like advertisement to solicit more support. At the same time, there's like and also like campaign money is big, right? I heard that President Obama actually collected $69 million during the election through like the internet, and there's like a survey by a life insurance company in Japan that 8% of the 1,000 respondents that said that they're gonna donate money via internet if the internet is gonna be deregulated in the election.
So what are the regulations at this point? That there's a looser ability to use it now that, that particular law has passed. But can you raise funds? Can you actually use it to campaign actively?
Yeah, I think so. But well, again, like it's really, really murky area. So the things that I clearly know is that I cannot send out email soliciting support. Please vote for Kevin. No, I cannot do that. And then only the political parties actually have a banner advertisement on the internet, not the political candidates. So there's like a lot of like very fuzzy like areas that the government have to really good job like explaining and also probably further deregulate in the later elections.
It sounds like it's an evolving process there, the same way that it was in the United States in the 2008 election. The Obama campaign was actually congratulated for doing a very strong social media campaign, but that effort was somewhat general. In this 2012 election, where they were facing a very bad economy and a lot of other problems around the world, the Obama campaign started focusing on data mining, a very specific focus of targeting individual voters by their interest. Is that something that we will begin to see in the developing use of the internet in the regions that you're covering?
Well, if I first start with South Korea, in 2002, it was the first time that each candidate's campaign team had a team manager who was in charge of doing the SNS campaign. But we have not seen such sophisticated level of data mining or trying to tailor the campaign to individual voters depending on their interests. Mostly they were trying to publicize when the candidates were giving a speech in the street, or just to stream broadcast when they were giving a speech. So it was still in the basic elementary level. But I think because South Koreans, there's more than 33 million smartphone users out of 50 million population. So given that, I think we can probably see such efforts coming in a couple of years, yeah.
And that's a two-way conversation. Obviously, using the internet to organize and to solicit support, but also reading about the elections and reading about the issues that are affecting them. You cover in your work the technology giant Samsung and their very successful smartphone, the Galaxy. Has that had an impact on young voters, getting them more involved by being aware of the issues that are out there? Is there any data on that?
Oh, are you asking about Galaxy's impact on election? Yeah. Galaxy smartphone? Well, well, yeah, it is true. Galaxy is one of the most popular smartphone in South Korea and in the globe. Actually, Apple has much fewer market share in South Korea. I wouldn't specifically single out a single smartphone as having a greater impact than the other smartphone, because I think there are studies that argue, say, Apple smartphone user or certain smartphone users are more active on SNS than the other smartphone users, if you look at it that way. So, but South Korea first saw their smartphone at the end of 2009. So compared to 2009 and 2013, smartphone is playing a lot of role in shaping public opinion. Yeah,
and adding to that, 2 weeks before the actual campaign period started in Malaysia, most of my friends who are helping out in the campaigning, they all advertise on their Facebook, can I buy a second-hand iPhone?
And was that specifically so they could follow the
yes,
elections?
so no, not only that, because the iPhone, you can take pictures, then you can put it on Facebook and all that. It's very convenient, right? So all of a sudden, everybody is looking for iPhone 3S. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, can I have one and all that? So people are asking for second-hand iPhones, very specifically, in Malaysia. So that I see that as a sign that that this is going to be a tool for communications, basically.
Let's explore that a little bit, Jerry, because you said in Malaysia, these YouTube sites that you're involved with had
Yeah.
as many as 500,000 views per day.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't just going to internet cafes and looking at their desktops on those. They're seeing these campaign videos
to
on
four-
their smartphones.
On your smartphone, all up to 40% mobile devices.
And is that kind of traffic coming directly from Malaysia, or is this the Malaysian diaspora that's involved or interested in the elections, and how does that impact them?
A little bit of both, because the Malaysian, we have about 1 point something million Malaysians all over the world. So we've been trying to get these people to come back to Malaysia to vote, because this year Malaysia has finally decided that we should do postal vote, but nobody trusted postal vote. So we all started a campaign to bring people back to Malaysia to vote. There's a huge campaign going on. There was a huge campaign going on in Hong Kong to encourage people to vote, to go home and vote. So singers get together, writers get together, songwriters get together, things like that. So there's a huge community that will form on the social network to bring people back to vote. So, but the thing is, the only way to bring the news out, we don't have radio, we don't have TV. The best way is through YouTube, actually. So YouTube was being used by most of these groups. I wouldn't call them, they are not even NGOs. There's a new term in Malaysia, non-government individuals, NGIs. So these are NGIs who are working on their own with their own resources, using social network as the medium to bring the news out. So many of our viewers are local, but more so in the region, Singapore, Hong Kong, a little bit of China, because China you need VPN, and some parts of the United States. That's about it. Yeah.
When we talk about the digital divide, we're usually talking about people that have access to the internet and people that don't. I think in the cases of elections, the digital divide that we're looking at is really more along the lines of age. Younger voters or younger people maximizing both the internet for information and possible mobilization politically. Let's talk about that digital divide, the age digital divide in your regions of coverage. Ayako, you want to address that first? You brought that up a little bit with just
Digital
the age.
divide?
In Japan?
You know what? The digital divide actually exists mostly in the lawmakers. I hear a lot of lawmakers saying that I'm not going to intentionally not going to capitalize on the internet to seek votes, because their constituents, as I just explained, would not see what I say or what I want to campaign for on the internet. Mostly it's much better to just communicate directly. And actually, when I go to the website of the lawmakers, there are people like they have not updated their comments since 2 years ago or something like that. That's unforgivable, for private companies and stuff like that. So I would say probably the people who are lagging behind the technological revolution would be the lawmakers.
I want to comment on that specifically. The head of Japan's Restoration Party, Toru Hashimoto, recently made some comments about comfort women, the use of sexual slavery during World War II. And I wonder if that digital divide hurt him, if he didn't think those comments were going to be amplified. If I could just quote what he had said, and you may be familiar with this issue, whether it was of their own volition or against their will, the comfort women system was something necessary, he said. For military morale back then, it was probably necessary. So he's talking about the Japanese military's use of women for prostitution during World War II. And the question for Ayako is, comments like that, do they really reflect a complete disconnect with the internet, that they don't understand how these comments are going to be amplified?
Well, we have to remember that how Hashimoto became so popular or powerful. I mean, he completely utilized the clout of the internet. He disseminated, I don't remember how many, but I'm sure he had over 10,000, I'm sure, like, millions of like followers and stuff like that. That's how he got himself popular in the first place. But he made a big mistake that he thought he could be Shintaro Ishihara, another hawkish lawmakers who announced the purchase of Senkaku Island or Daiyu Island. That he's been in the politics for like decades, 50 years, 60 years, and there's like the sentiment that the Japanese voters, including the legislators, says, oh, that's the Ishihara, so we can just let him say whatever he wants. But that's not the case with Hashimoto. He's still political novice. And he didn't really I don't think he did not understand the power of the internet, but I think he did not understand the international diplomacy of the politics, and how is the comment of the lawmaker would affect the Japanese diplomacy or national interest. I was reading a story by Hiroko Tabuchi, New York Times reporter. How she quoted him, how she referred him, a future candidate of the Japanese prime minister. Again, this is not the case. He's not going to be the prime minister. We knew that after the election, December election. But something like the New York Times, with much clout, influence, place him like that. That will go viral. So that's the power of the internet that he failed to understand.
But I think the Japanese are just realizing the power of social media. In the past, internet is just a tool, because my wife is Japanese, so she doesn't use Facebook, she doesn't Twitter, she doesn't do any of those things. She sends me emails and then she pretends it's SMS. So it's that bad, okay? So basically, right? And my wife isn't 53 years old. So the thing is, a lot of people see that as an opportunity, so they go into Japan and try to promote social media. So I know a few Chinese who are working in Japan to help promote social media. So now in China, Weibo, one of the top Weibo character, we don't use character because she's more like an actor, is a Japanese AV star, right? And she is not being promoted by Japanese, she was promoted by Chinese. So, but the thing is, it's changing, right? I wouldn't say the old. They are just realizing that, look, there's this new tool, and then we should be moving on to that. So I think that's going to change maybe in the next 5 years.
I agree with you. But I think the thing is, like, I think politicians tend to fail to understand how much what they say on the internet can harm them.
Yeah.
And then Hashimoto actually had that. And now I'm not really sure if the party will exist after the election. There's like a party convention a couple of days ago. Only 40 people came. This is big. I mean, I'm not really sure. Ishin-no-kai is like, definitely getting a hard hit from what Hashimoto said and what Hashimoto did in the internet sphere, as well as in an internet sphere.
Obviously, ramifications from what he said. While we've moved into policy a little bit, let me keep Jerry on the line here. The conflict over the East China Sea Islands has been very interesting in China and Japan. How is that playing out on the internet in China? And how has that kind of fueled the discussion or the debate?
You mean China-Philippine side or China-Japan side?
China-Japan side.
Okay. There are two types of Chinese: the really hot-blooded ones and the calm ones. So unfortunately, it's the hot-blooded one that are very outspoken on the internet. So as long as you post anything about Japan, anything at all, you just say sushi tastes good, and that's it. Then the next 2,500 comments will be negative. You're a sellout, you're a dog, you're a whatever, right? All kinds. So, but the thing is that is anyone who understands the relationship between Japan and China will see that as them using that as a means to vent out their whatever anger that they have. I know a lot of Chinese who work in Japan because we recently went to Japan to cover the earthquake, second anniversary earthquake memorial. So and we interview a lot of Chinese. Then they say, you know, most Chinese don't really know where their anger come from, and then those anger were manifested on the internet. But the thing is, don't read those messages as negative. I see that as a country opening up.
Again, is this a generational thing?
It is, yes.
I guess I should have asked you how it played out in your household.
My wife thinks that the island belongs to Japan. Okay. I'll just keep it at that. Right. I'm Malaysian, so really.
One more question on the broader issues for Youkyung. When we look at what's been happening on the Korean Peninsula with Kim Jong-un and the recent threats of using nuclear force in the Pacific, how has that played out in the internet, in what you're seeing in public dialogues and kind of chat rooms in South Korea?
Well, one thing we have to keep in mind is that even before Twitter and Facebook took off in South Korea, South Koreans always had gatherings online using internet cafes or online communities, and people actually who gather online, they discuss things and they meet outside the internet in the real space to hang out as well. So there are places where a lot of very politically active young people gather, and a lot of people just gather for like getting tips about cooking and things like that. And so in both spaces, like Twitter, Facebook, and on this online cafes, people who are really active and very emotional about issues about Japan or North Korea, they continue to express their anger or their protest against those provocations. But I think if you look at the real space, real life, people's reactions might be quite different from what you see online, because as you said, what you hear online is more people who are very opinionated, not opinionated, but people who are more vocal than here. And if I go to the street to interview people during the North Korea's like provocations, provocative rhetorics, people will be often calm, and many of them may not know about what North Korea is saying. And some of them who heard about them told me that they just got a call from their friends overseas asking if you guys are doing okay. And in Korea, and if you look at the Seoul street, it would be just like any other day.
I guess it proves true for the internet as well as for general society. The people who are most involved in politics and in issues are usually the minority, a small number. So. Okay, we've had a pretty interesting panel discussion so far. Let's expand this a little bit and open it up to our audience. Again, we're talking about the use of the internet and SMS in politics, but we can expand that a little bit if you'd like. But let's keep it focused on the internet areas. You had your hands up first, so you're the quickest.
Thank you. I'm Hannah Bay, the AAJA Asia Seoul Vice President. So one question that I actually saw on Twitter from one of our members in Seoul was about hashtag use. I feel like in South Korea, hashtags have not come in the same way in terms of the popularity of their use. Do you think that there are other techniques that South Koreans and people in Malaysia and Japan can use to mobilize on social media and to find like-minded people?
Well, I think one reason South Koreans did not use hashtag on Twitter in the beginning was because Twitter did not offer Korean language hashtag, but I think they changed that, and now, so that was like a technical issue in the beginning. I'm not sure if there would be any other or better way to search other than the hashtag, but can you?
Do you think that people are using hashtags more now?
I think more than before. I see Korean hashtag on Twitter. Yeah.
Hi, Malte. I'm freelancer based in Seoul as well, and I have a question. Would you say that in Korea you have freedom of expression on the internet, or especially when it comes to North Korea, it can get very dangerous for people to express their opinion freely, even on the internet?
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing up that question. constitutionally, yes, we have freedom of expression, but we also have laws that National Security Act, which bans praising or distributing anything that praises North Korea. So some of the users on Twitter has been prosecuted for retweeting North Korean tweets. So even though we have freedom of expression, reading those cases on newspaper probably make people to self-censor more, and you cannot explicitly praise North Korea on online space or in real world. And another issue is that South Korea has a pretty, you can be criminalized by, you can face the criminal suit for libeling or distributing false information. It's not just like civil suit, you pay compensation, but you can get also jailed. We have a very, it's really easy to sue someone based on libeling in South Korea. So that also, I think, made people self-censor in a way, yeah.
Other questions? While we're on that issue, why don't we ask Jerry? Jerry, are you seeing any changes in China in a more openness on the internet? Are we going to continue to have to use VPNs and other workarounds to get what we want?
We were hoping the new leader would open up Facebook, but it was we were still hoping. See, most of our friends live on Facebook, so we had our problems. So anyway, we see the people opening up more. Actually, the users of social network has opened up more than before. Nowadays, you see things that, even you compare now and a year ago, the kind of things that they share online. In the past, they share about their life, boyfriend, girlfriend, dogs, pets, whatever. Now they share their thoughts, which is very different. And with more use of multimedia elements, things like animated GIFs, things like video, even recordings of audio. So things like that. People, they share songs, they share things like that. So I see that as a sign of people opening up, using different means to express themselves. Sometimes they're angry, but they don't want to say they're angry. They put an angry song up. So things like that. Or as you can see in certain places, they change the picture of the avatar, right? They change the color to black or something. So that's a form of protest, but it's a very silent but vocal protest that people use.
I wonder, are there any other interesting workarounds? I know that David Bandersky with our China Media Project here has talked about how newspapers can actually use codes and puzzling headlines to express dissatisfaction or some type of other protest. Are we seeing that on the internet at all?
It has been going on for many years, but the thing is, there's a Chinese saying that goes, the good is 1 foot tall, but the evil is 1 meter tall, things like that. So it's a constant cat and mouse game that you devise something new, and then they come and close you down. Then you think out something new again. Then they come and close you down. I still want to go back to China tomorrow. So
well, maybe we can shift the blame to the giant internet portals. I worked at Yahoo at one time in 2006. And at the time, we found out, kind of surprisingly, that Yahoo was actually cooperating with Chinese authorities to give information about bloggers there.
Yes, that's because they have no choice. They needed to have their server in China.
Sure, but is there any anger towards those portals for cooperating rather than maybe taking a political stand and saying, no, we're not going to be a part of this?
I think there was a huge protest online to boycott Yahoo for a moment. But people forget. Then after that, they forget.
Short memories on the internet.
Yeah, especially. I was just sharing with Mia just now. Jimin LDP supporter, the ruling party's website, like page on Facebook has 43,000 likes. Malaysian typical 37,000 likes. I think I did a screenshot. A typical Malaysian political fan page has 435,000 likes. So that's the kind of difference you see between Japan and Malaysia. We don't have high-speed bandwidth to the home, but we have plenty of people using them. Yeah.
Questions? No, we have to
Actually, I have a
Go ahead.
question to. I would like to know about other Asian countries as well. Maybe because many South Koreans are early adopters, but I think we started to see signs that a lot of people are already feeling fatigue about so many social media around. And so even though even the two major candidates during the presidential elections, they did not have more than like 1 million followers on their Twitter. So out of like 50 million populations. So you don't see that Twitter gaining as much traction among people, and also we start to see reports that South Koreans are going to opting out of public social media like Twitter and more going to private ones like mobile messengers like KakaoTalk or things like that. So I wonder if this is common in other Asian countries. If you see this kind of sign in other Asian countries as well.
I think Japanese people are very, very big on Twitter. I think the language itself is very compatible with the 24 character. And then I hear I read stories that people are actually using the Twitter to look for some dinner buddies or lunch buddies, especially those who are really, really lonely. They just Twitter, say something, you know what, I'm not doing it tonight, and then he suddenly gets some response from his friends that, let's go out for dinner or something like that. So I think there's like a lot of like usage of the Japanese Twitter users. But at the same time, one of my staff writer wrote a story about the two people actually campaigning against the Twitter. So like they sit on the street, and then if you have something that you want to tweet, just tell me. Let's not the boycott, but let's face the reality rather than the virtual world.
I mean,
Is
what
that
about the
very-
audience? I mean,
Yeah, I'm just curious.
yeah.
Is that very popular in Japan? Is
No,
there kind of a reaction against the internet?
No, I don't think so. And the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is probably the biggest fan of the Facebook or Twitter right now. So.
And our political leaders don't really like to use Facebook because the moment they post something, then they get a lot of really negative comments.
Yeah, I have to agree on the Japanese using Twitter because that's how I track my friend's lifeline. 2 years ago, when the earthquake happened, on the Twitter line, my friend suddenly went missing for 3 days. We were so worried about him. I thought he was in Tohoku area, and I started emailing everyone. It's like, have you seen him? Have you seen him? So and then he started tweeting again. 3 days after that, I was like, oh, he's fine. So, and then he said, I went to this, he took pictures and all that stuff, so he went missing for 3 days because he was taking pictures of the Tohoku area. So, yeah, it's a big thing. I have to agree on that. So.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think Line application, does anybody here know what Line is?
Yes.
It's by Korean company, actually.
Yeah, it's made by a South Korean company, but it took off much more in Japan than in South
Yeah,
Korea.
yeah. So it's really, I think it's actually outnumbering soon. I think it's going to outnumber Twitter, and so I think basically the basic is that Japanese loves those apps and also like technological tools. To
How many of you
communicate.
use Line here? A show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you must absolutely try it.
I mean, I don't really have like questions, but I just want to share, some of the things that you've been touched on. I'm a reporter from Thailand, and Twitter has been really important in reporting stories there. And even my stations, they actually use the tweets of the reporters to be counted as a job improvement as well. Like the more we tweet the news, the more we get the higher paycheck by the end of the year. That's how we do it, because we kind of integrate the social media into news reporting. But at the same time,
They literally tally your tweets.
yeah, exactly. They actually required the reporters to tweet at least.
So do you have a work tweet and a
Yeah.
personal tweet? Oh, wow.
So basically, they required all journalists to tweet at least 30 tweets a month, and that's the requirement. That's like and that's the minimum tweets. And but the thing is, when you mention Line is but the thing at the same time, Line I find it to be kind of more personal than Twitter's, because it's kind of like it's more of the instant messaging between between you and your friends, and I think many companies are taking advantage of that by kind of promoting their Line accounts. I find it to be a little bit more. I want to use Line to be just a personal communication between me and my friends, not not kind of
Are you
the
aware
commercial
of
way.
a software called WeChat?
I'm sorry?
WeChat is a QQ Tencent product.
No, we actually don't use that in Thailand.
Okay.
It's not that popular. I think Line and Twitter are very important, and using hashtag is also a very big part of in the Twitter in Thailand as well. We also hashtag both English and Thai.
So do you still have your censorship issues in Thailand?
I think the only thing that's kind of the things that the journalists like us are keep in mind in Thailand is the less majest law. That's actually the only thing that have to be concerned of, that you cannot criticize or making any comments on the royal family. I think that's the kind of the only issue. Yeah.
I think he brings up a good point. I wonder if all of you could talk about using Twitter as reporters. In some ways, does this make you less circumspect because you have to reply to stories so quickly? You end up having to respond to them rather than thinking about them and being perhaps more thoughtful. Just a quick response from all of you. Who had a question?
I find Twitter really helpful because it helps me find my sources who's interested in a certain topic that I want to get close about. For example, if I have to get close about someone stuck in the airport, I can go on Twitter and search about whether somebody has tweeted about being stuck in the airport and how that's bad. But then I would not quote someone directly on the Twitter. I'll try to direct message or mention that person and ask so that we can have a phone call to make sure that the person is really stuck in the airport. Yeah. So it was really helpful finding a source. Yeah.
I don't like to think Twitter as the source, as a means to distribute news, but rather I would like to see Twitter being used as a form to promote news. That means you have written your story and then you put it on, and then you will put a link on Twitter and tell people about the story. Because as you tweet about the story, you see, most stories don't happen that way. You have to go back and think about it and write. I think that's what journalists do, right? Yeah. So
I think as reporter also has to harness on media literacy per se. Like there are so many false information and correct information especially after the March 11th disaster. There are so many not clear or not correct information circulated the Twitter face, and that was really damaging the entire conversation. So I try not to depend on the source, but at the same time it's really helpful to see the trend. And if I see a lot of comments, similar comments, I try to confirm and probably reach out to some of the Twitter user and then maybe interview or something. But
Also, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether Jerry will agree with me on this. Now, I think Facebook page of the politician in Malaysia is slowly becoming like the CV. If I would like to know a politician, I would just go there and see what he did on Facebook, what he updated. And if I normally go to a ruling party politician, most probably he has nothing on the Facebook. So people don't trust that. So, he did nothing. So just based on the Facebook page, they made the conclusion that. So
I think in the past we rely on a web page, but now you rely on the fan page. I don't know if this is the case in any other countries. At least for Malaysia, that's the case. Right.
I think LDP or other opposition parties are actually requiring its candidate to at least open up their account with the Twitter and the Facebook, because they regulate the internet in the upcoming election, as I told you. And I think Abe is really, really big on Facebook. He updates comments, and there's thousands of comments that's actually following his comments. So I think Abe is getting windfall from this movement, actually.
Okay, just to wrap it up here, we're running out of time. So if each of you could just briefly talk about the stories that are going to be coming out of your regions soon, what you think is going to be interesting to our audience and how it's going to be covered on the internet.
Well, I just want to talk about in South Korea, to be a good reporter, I think you have to pay attention to what's going on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, Kakao story, because there has been recent instances that started out on YouTube or Kakao Talk and became really viral and covered by mainstream media, and then really brought out changes on corporate behavior. Like so to beat other to be competition and to be quick to cover, to find out about these things, such as there were I don't want to go into too much details about this, but there were incidents where companies had to force someone to leave who had a very bad behaviors on board to flight attendants, and that incident became only known through social media at first, but later it got hugely covered by mainstream media, and that person had to leave their job.
Also, President Park's spokesperson recently on bad behavior in the United States. And that must have made some Twitter traffic.
Yeah, that also first got posted on this online community in the U.S. and then picked up by mainstream media later. So that's many times I think South Korean journalists find themselves getting tips about news stories or breaking stories online, and these stories can have potential to change the behavior of corporations or politicians. Yeah.
Jerry?
The recent general election in Malaysia, because there were large-scale suspected fraud, I wouldn't say they're real or not. So a lot of Malaysians are putting up petitions online, petitioning to the U.S. government for foreign intervention into cleaning up our elections. So I think that's one area that we can look at. The other area is the widespread arrest. They are arresting people now, and also the large-scale gatherings of people using internet as the means to mobilize. 50,000 people turned up yesterday in a field in Malaysia. So things like that are happening in Malaysia. So maybe that's one area we can look at. Yeah.
Ayako?
I think it's. I think we really have to be careful, like especially when the tensions among three nations are really, really intense. Like there's like very negative conversations going on the Facebook, Twitter, and and the internet sphere. And NHK reported that there's like a format where Japanese can actually go to, and then his comments automatically translated into Chinese, and then there's like a very negative conversation going on. So, but at the same time, I covered about this like internet like impact on like Japanese right wing movement. But at the same time, I think there are the avid Twitter users or politically slanted like Twitter users tend to be very right wing, and I think it's kind of have to understand that those people are not, their voice are not really prevalent. I think they represents the minority. That's I just wanted to highlight.
The internet does seem to be a double-edged sword for us in the fact that we can use it to report, but we also have to get the comments from that reporting back to us fairly
And the kind
quickly.
of friends we keep. You see, if all our friends support somebody, and then you will get this feel-good feeling that somebody is going to win. But the thing is, you only have this group of friends. If you widen your friendship spread, then you realize maybe it's not so. So I think that's also...
that seems to be an internet
Yes,
phenomenon, that we focus and we
Yes.
reflect only what we want to see.
Yes, and we are misinforming ourselves, which is really bad.
We've run out of time here. A big round of applause for our panelists for their informed comments, and thank you all for joining today. Hopefully you learned something.